Father, thank you again for today. Thank you, Lord, for uh, all that you've done for us today. And Lord, I know that there's a lot of pressures that all of the students are exposed to and they have right now. Many of us wondering about what's going on at home and the pressures there and the pressures of wanting to do well, getting things sorted out, the financial pinch and crunch that all of us face. I pray, Lord, that each one of the students in this class, but even throughout the campus, will experience your joy in the midst of all of this, and that they will understand that your yoke is easy and your burden is light. Alleviate the pressure, we pray, and bring honor and glory to yourself. In Jesus' name, amen. You know, I've been watching the students walk across campus here. The first day, I thought to myself, I said, man, these people aren't friendly up here. But then it dawned on me what was going on. Everybody's preoccupied.
You ain't kidding.
I called the Trinity Walk. I was going to breakfast this morning, and I said,
That's it.
Louis. So I said, man, that's probably true. Got a good passage for you all. This has nothing to do with the class, but I want to give it to you anyway. I was going to speak on today the anatomy of pressure from Psalm 55. Let's see, how can we make this apply? Well, as you go into the urban area, there'll be a lot of pressure. Now, the anatomy of pressure from Psalm 55. A little interesting thing about this. This summer, while I was going through a lot of this stuff myself, you know, I had the look on my head. We got to get $50,000 by the 1st of October, and we need, you know, I was doing the same Trinity Walk with a little pressure. But I went away, and the Lord really spoke to my heart from this psalm. Context here is that David has been, his son Absalom has pulled a masterful, bloodless coup d'etat. Historically, David's probably much older. His best friend, Ahithophel, has betrayed him. I mean, his bosom buddy and lifelong pal. And here David, one of the greatest kings in the then known world, is outside of the city fleeing for his life. And with all of the incredible pressure on him. In the psalm, David goes through a fourfold process of pressure, or his response to pressure, in verses 1 through 14, or 15 actually. And I'll just mention what those four things are, and you can look at it yourself. One is frustration, verse 2. He says, I'm restless in my complaint and surely distracted. The expression distracted means that he's just looking for a way to solve this thing, and he's frustrated because there's no solution. Verse 6, the next thing that he experiences is isolation. He says, oh, that I had wings like a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. Behold, I would wander far away, I would lodge in the wilderness. I would hasten to my place of refuge from the stormy wind and tempest. Now, I've heard many messages on this text that have misinterpreted what David is saying. Some say that this is a cry of victory, and David is saying how he wants to be with the Lord and triumph. And no, that's not what he's saying. He's saying he wants to quit. I just want to get away. If I had the wings of a dove, I'd get out of Deerfield, get off this campus, forget about these papers, these pressures, these exams, all this hassles, all of this performance, and I just want to get away. I just want to get away. Verse 9, he goes through retribution or anger, sees in verse 9 and verse 15. He says, confuse, O Lord, divide their tongues, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. Verse 15, let death come deceitfully upon them, and let them go down alive to Sheol. The King James Version says hell. I just want to tell them all where to go. For evil is in their dwelling, in their midst. David is angry. Nothing he can do about it. You know, that's what happens to us, isn't it? When we get in situations, we're so pressured, and there's nothing we can do, we get mad, angry. And that's what David finds. He says, these people, it's not fair. Why are they doing this to me? And then probably the ultimate is total humiliation in verse 12 through 14. Verse 13 says, verse 12 says, for it is not an enemy who reproaches me, then I could bear it, nor is it one who hates me, who has exalted himself against me, then I could hide myself from him. But it is you, this is Ahithophel, it is you, a man my equal. In other words, you work for me, but Ahithophel, I didn't treat you like an employee. I treated you like an equal, like my friend. We were bosom buddies. He says, my companion and my familiar friend. There was nothing that I hid from you. And to add insult to injury, look at verse 14. We who had a sweet fellowship together, walked in the house of God in the throng. We worshiped together, Ahithophel. We prayed about our problems together. We served God together. And I found out that it is you of all people that has betrayed me. Now, how does David respond to the pressure? Verses 16 through 23 talks about the proper perspective on pressure. Their volumes are written probably between verse 15 and 16. Abruptly, he says, as for me. It's almost as if he cuffs himself and he resurrects the history of God in his life. I don't know, but maybe he thought about, wait a minute, why am I thinking this way? You know, I remember when I was 14, 15, 16 years old and God gave me Goliath. And I remember how I ran for my life for 16 years in the wilderness from Saul. And yet God provided for me and kept me. Man, what's wrong with me now? How come I'm forgetting all of this stuff so easily? He says, as for me. Now notice, I shall call upon God and the Lord will save me. He uses two different names for God. And the first perspective is that when we're in the midst of pressure, we need to focus, number one, on God's sovereignty. I will call upon God. He uses the term Elohim. Elohim has to do with the person of God, who he is. That God is still on his throne. And as if David sits down and remembers, oh, God is sovereign. He's still there. This is a bitter experience, but he's still there. And he says, and the Lord, Jehovah, will save me or deliver me. Jehovah focuses on God's job description. What he does. He interferes human history. And we focus on the sovereignty of God, but secondly, in the midst of pressure, we focus on the salvation of God. That not only is God sovereign, but he is more than willing to address every single need that I have. And then the third thing that we focus on is the sustaining power of God. Down at verse 22. Cast your burden upon the Lord, and he will sustain you. Now, as you look in your margin of the New ASV, it really gives the closer literal rendering of that. It actually says, cast what he has given to you back on the Lord. In other words, David says, now, God has allowed me to be in this pressure. God has placed this on me. And he says, cast back on the Lord what he's placed on you. Actually, pressure is a test of your faith and dependency. And he says, and he will sustain you. Now, he won't sustain. Christians do have nervous breakdowns. He won't sustain us unless we give back to him what he's placed on us. And then I love this. He says, he will never allow the righteous to be shaken. That verb is totter. Get the word picture there? When we put back on God's shoulders what he's placed on our shoulders, we won't even totter under the load. It's incredible. But thou, O God, will bring them down to the pit of destruction. Men of bloodshed and deceit will not live out half their days, but I will trust in thee. If you look at 2 Samuel chapter 17, verse 23, Ahithophel, when he found out what he had done to David, the full import and impact hit him. He went back home, put his house in order, and he went and hanged himself. The scripture says, be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever man sows, that shall he also reap. And there ain't no such thing as crop failure with God. And So our perspective on pressure should be focused upon sovereignty of God, the salvation of God, and sustaining power. This passage is one that's for me, that I preach to myself very, very often. Ain't got nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I thought I might share. So as you cultivate your Trinity walk, lift your sights a little bit. I mean, it was really fun. I was cracking up this morning. I was standing and watching all these students go by.
Practicing when I'm falling, I have to break their neck.
Watch it sometimes. And I thought they were unfriendly, but they're really not. They're just preoccupied. Totally preoccupied. And I could just hear the guy conjugating those verbs. I knew that's what he was doing.
Some people have finals tomorrow.
I know. He may have been calling professors bad names underneath the voice. I remember when I first came on staff with Crusade, we have winter IBS, Institute of Biblical Studies, and then that goes right into new staff training. Well, a lot of young families, some of them have been there for like 5 weeks. And so we're going through the Holy Spirit booklet. We put the Holy Spirit in the booklet. Everything's transferable with Crusade. And no, Dr. Bright, please don't watch this. I'm just kidding. So we're sitting in this on this training class, and one of the Crusade staff is explaining about the natural man and the carnal man and the spiritual man. And this dude had been there for 5 weeks stood up and said, I don't want to be spiritual. I want to be carnal. I just want to be carnal. Woo! The pressure had gotten to him. I don't think he ever made staff, though. All right, let's get rolling here. I wanted to do something, and I plan on doing this after showing the video, but I feel like I wouldn't have done it justice by running through it. So what I'm going to do, this was not written in your syllabus, but I had assumed to do it. I want to talk about the philosophical history of Black America. The philosophical history of Black America. Or, in other words, 5 men that have stood at strategic points in our history to offer us direction and contribute to our philosophy. Now, it's important to understand this. Like I said, someone said that unfortunately, the only thing we learn from history is that we don't learn anything at all from history, and we perpetuate the same mistakes. And I'm one that believes that our lives ought to have a context, and as we minister cross-culturally, not only do we need to understand the sociological dynamics of today and the issues of today, but how people got to where we are and what is a broader context. Maybe you're not like me, thank God, but it's helpful. It's helpful to understand those things, to understand the dynamics involved, and it gives you a lot more relevance to what you're saying. There are 5, and I want to mention strongly 4, and I do have this 5th person is still alive today, but you can't underestimate his influence. But there are 4 critical people historically who are no longer with us that had, quote, prophetic, and I use that loosely, messages at certain critical points in our history and development. They are Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, and A. Philip Randolph. The 5th person is Jesse Jackson, and I'll tell you why. Whether people agree or disagree with Jesse, in order to be intellectually honest, the influence that he has is incredible. the first person, Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington represents the voice of economic development. Take that down. Booker T. Washington represents the voice of economic development. Contextually here, now a lot of modern black historians write Booker T. Washington off. They call him a foot-shuffling nigger. That's what many people call him. They say he compromised. They say he worshipped at the shrine of white idolization. They put him down. That, taken into account, some of that probably is true to some extent. However, I think we need to see these people in their historical context. Booker T. Washington came along during the heart of Reconstruction. Our folks had no slice of the economic pie. We had nothing, nada. No prominence, no power, no prestige, no influence, period. Booker T. was concerned about our survival. Now, Booker T. lived in relative obscurity, relatively speaking, until 1895. Now, let me just say, Booker T. Washington established Tuskegee Institute, and indirectly established Grambling Institute, which became Grambling College, which today is Grambling University. Now, Booker T. was invited to speak at the Cotton States Exposition in Atlanta, Georgia in 1895. There's nothing very moving about his message or what he spoke on that day. However, he used two illustrations that caught the attention of white industrialists and very wealthy people that catapulted him into prominence. The two illustrations that he used were, first of all, the famed separate fingers doctrine. He said, now this is a simplification, but he said, just as the hand is one and the fingers are separate, so also national unity and racial separation could go together. Now, I do think he sold us down the tubes on that one, but again, he's a product of his time. He's a product of his time. But the other one, that illustration that he used that really catapulted him into prominence, was his famous illustration of the ship sailing off out at sea that had run out of fresh water. And they see this oncoming vessel, and they flagged them down and said, we don't have any water. Well, to their surprise, they signal back and say, put your buckets down where you are. Well, they did that, and they pulled up fresh water out of the mouth of the Amazon River. His point being this, that in order for black folks to survive, we had to turn into something profitable that which we knew how to do the best, and that was to work the land. And so he said we needed to seize control of our own economic development and growth and start right where we are. Now, Booker T. offered a great deal of hope to people during that time. He began to pioneer in a number of things. But basically, he challenged us to use our technical agricultural skills to offer survival. And his role model was a clarion voice during his time. Now, there's a second guy who was a contemporary of Booker T. Washington that was at the other extreme of the spectrum. To say that W.E.B. Du Bois did not like Booker T. Washington is probably the classic understatement of the century. Du Bois was, white folks didn't know how to handle Du Bois.
Nobody.
That's right. Nobody knew how to handle Du Bois. Because he was a bona fide intellectual. I mean, the guy was 100% cerebral. He was educated at Fisk University, Harvard University, and for a short time, the University of Berlin. He was the son of Northeastern freed blacks, somewhat of a bourgeois background. Du Bois's biggest problem with Booker T was that Booker T was too conciliatory in his approach. To understand Du Bois, now Du Bois is probably one of the hardest, at least for me he is, he's one of the hardest black personalities, historical personalities to figure out, because he has somewhat of an erratic development in his life. The first third of his life, he believed one thing, then he got involved with the Niagara movement, and then he died a Marxist. And it's almost, it's amazing, the pilgrimage that he was on. However, in order to understand a little bit about his nature, Du Bois was the voice of confrontation and educational advancement. In order to understand a little bit about Du Bois, you have to understand his basic presupposition was that in order for people to be, black folks to be treated as men, they had to act like men. They had to be strong. Du Bois developed, at least the first third of his public professional career, the famous theory of the talented tenth. Du Bois said that in order for black folks to be, or any culturally representative group, minority in a society to survive, 10% of its leadership must be academically qualified or educated. He believed that with all of his heart, and he campaigned for that. He went on the stump recruiting blacks to the young, new, fledgling black institutions and colleges. And he cried out for academic excellence. And it was largely through his campaign of pushing the talented 10th that many blacks began to enroll in colleges and prepare themselves. But it was at a very needed time. It was a very needed time. This was during the 20s, and he pushed very strongly for that. Parenthetically, although this doesn't have the bear on what we're doing, Du Bois did get involved with the Niagara movement, which was the predecessor of the NAACP, and causing the advancement for people. But Du Bois said something very interesting, and I want you all to never forget this. It's not going to be in an exam or anything, but I want you to, this haunts me because it's really, really true. Later on in his older life, he was asked about his theory of the talented 10th, and he repudiated it, oddly enough. And he said this, and I've never forgotten, I read this in Coombs's book, by the way. He said, the main reason why I no longer embrace my own theory of the talented 10th is that once you create an intellectual elite, all too often they're too far removed from the masses to exert any real leadership. Think about that. Think about that. That's why it's so important that our educational process does not distance us from the real needs of people. The real leaders in this country, I've often wondered, why are the guys that are the most dynamic leaders sometimes, not always, sometimes are not the most educated people? And a lot of it is because of the street sense. They're not too far removed from the guts of people. Where they are, they can feel with them. And I don't mean to go to the other extreme. I do think the ideal form of education is to make sure that we're constantly seeing it in our context. We have balance with the practical and the academic at the same time. But I thought that was very, very interesting. But the thing to remember about Du Bois was that he represented the voice of educational advancement at a time in which it was sorely, sorely needed. Now, the third guy is a very interesting guy. I like him personally because he's, his personality, he's really a gadfly. He is really different. His name is Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey represented the voice of black pride. Garvey was somewhat easygoing and flamboyant. Now, the jury's still out in some respects on Garvey. Garvey is sort of a mixed metaphor in the sense that in order for me to be intellectually honest, he did rip off his own folks, to be honest. I mean, it was cultish, Doc. You know, he had all the women in his harem and all this stuff. However, Garvey was born in 1887 in St. Ann's Bay, Jamaica, West Indies at that time, British West Indies. And he was strangely and oddly influenced by Booker T. Washington. And I say strangely and oddly, you'll see why later on, because he and Booker T. are hardly the same. But he was influenced by his book, Up From Slavery. Garvey went on a trip throughout some of Latin America and the Caribbean, and he came back to Jamaica with the conclusion that black people all over the world were persecuted. In I should have bought my notes. Put a question mark next to this. I think it's 1916. In 1916, he came to the United States to confer with Booker T, only to discover that he had died the year before. But being the businessman that he was, he saw that there was a virtual gold mine in this country in terms of mobilizing black folks. So he started the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Now, my Muslim friends get upset with me very, very much. But the Muslims, they claim that, you know, Elijah Muhammad had this great vision from God about Islam and the Nation of Islam. Bull feathers. Modern day American Muslim movement is patterned after the tenets of the UNIA, with a little bit of, you know, the Middle Eastern stuff added to it. But basically, it is just a carryover of some of the philosophical principles that Garvey laid down in his Universal Negro Improvement Association. The thing to remember about Garvey, though, now contextually here, the UNIA began on a crest wave in growth during the Great Depression. Now that's when we were totally in despair, hopeless and helpless, and we needed to feel good about ourselves. Garvey was the voice of black pride. He was the first man to popularize the term blackness. 50 or so years before it became very popular. Now, I get a little bit concerned with Stokely and these guys who talk about themselves being the fathers of Pan-Africanism, or like they're the ones that invented it. Garvey felt like we ought to move all black folks back to the motherland, Africa. And that eventually got him in trouble because a lot of the money he raised for his steamship never went to the steamship, if you know what I mean. But at any rate, like I said, the jury's still out on Garvey in some respects, but he represented a shot in the arm from a PR perspective for black folks during this time. The other man was a man by the name of A. Philip Randolph. We don't hear too much about him. Randolph, I like him probably more than some of the others because Randolph was a backroom strategist. Everybody else got the credit for what Randolph fought about. He was a movement man. Now, if I'd ask you, we don't know much about Randolph in terms of his contribution to black folks because a lot of his notoriety was during the labor unions development, the Porter strikes and organizing black folks in the labor unions. But Randolph represents the voice of mass mobilization. Much of the civil rights movement was based upon Randolph's principles of mass mobilization. In short, Randolph's philosophy is that we had to use the masses in black America as a wedge to break through discrimination, so that we can therefore become indispensable commodities of the system. Now, if I would ask you who was the brainchild behind the famed 1963 March on Washington, almost all of us would say, oh, Martin Luther King Jr. in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Wrong. The guy who wrote the blueprint for the famed March on Washington was A. Philip Randolph. Bayard Rustin helped out a little bit, but it was primarily A. Philip Randolph's concepts of grassroots mobilization. By the way, in a vicarious sense, Randolph has helped out the New Right, because the same concepts that Jerry Falwell and others who are involved in political activism, they stole them from the civil rights movement, which came from A. Philip Randolph. So we've made a contribution to evangelical Christianity, which would be interesting, and I think Randolph probably would flip, but that's okay. He made a contribution. God used it. I don't know. Never mind. I was going to say, I don't know if never. No, I better not say this. It's too controversial. I'm being videotaped. I'm not so sure that God used it. It was used of God. It was used. Now, I'll answer questions after class. No, I'll answer them now. In fact, if you have any about that, I've got some problems. Parenthetically here, I think many evangelicals are going to look back the year 2000, going to look back over our involvement politically with some real sadness and regret. I really believe that. I really believe that. And primarily, and I don't have any problems with us being involved. I don't have any problems with us being involved. In fact, I think it is our moral obligation and responsibility. But it seems to me that there is a blatant hypocrisy that we're not dealing with. We were told in the 60s that you couldn't legislate morality. That's what they said to black folks, that you can't. I don't know if y'all can remember that, but I remember that. I remember hearing that, you can't legislate morality. Well, all legislation is moral. Every law is moral. And the other thing, too, is that now, they're saying, let's just get involved and let's realize that we get the right candidates in office and there's going to be spiritual awakening. Well, you never go to Egypt for revival. And I just feel like God's pattern for revival, now, mind you, we need to be involved socially and politically. But God's pattern for revival is personal repentance. And I think we are getting our priorities a little bit screwed up. Sometimes I wonder if our involvement is nothing more than a cloak for our desire to be empowered. And that's why I agree with Chuck Colson, who said that once you begin to court power, I wonder if the gospel doesn't become held hostage to the very thing you want to change. I agree with that. I embrace that. Now, I'm not saying Christians shouldn't be involved, but as I said the other day, if you're going to pick up the mantle of a prophet, don't hold it out here and be selective in your denunciation of sin. Put the cotton picket thing on and let justice roll down. Call everything sin. Be against abortion, be against racism, be against greed, be against everything. Talk about whoremongers, liars, and everybody else. Let it all roll down. But if you're not going to pick it up completely, if you're just going to be selective in your denunciation of sin, get out of the political thing, go back to your pulpit, open your Bible, and teach your people.
Crawford, do you think that in the 60s, when whites were running for office, they never addressed the black issues? They more like swept that under the carpet.
Yeah.
And in the 80s, where they're addressing abortion, where blacks feel
That's
that
right.
man, I don't really care. I don't care
That's
about
right.
abortion, but I listen to Jackson,
That's
who
right.
says, man, he's more concerned about me.
That's right.
And they point back to the 60s where they say, you know, even though he's a Christian and has this label on him and he's standing for abortion,
Right.
those things are good. But that's not going to really help me
That's
because
right.
you didn't do anything in the 60s. Why should I listen to you in the 80s?
See, that's right, exactly. Very well articulated, very well stated. You see, there's a certain illegitimacy involved with our involvement right now because we were not honest when we should have been before. And so minorities take it as being illegitimate. That's the reason for the lack of trust. I mean, people are not stupid. People remember. And the only thing I wish that sometimes, and I am a biblicist, but only thing I wish the guys would stand up and say that not only are we against abortion in the name of God, greed and racism is wrong, and I was wrong. Say it. Give us some credibility. If you're saying that you're the champion and spokesman for evangelical Christianity, well, be it indeed. If not, then forget it. You do more to damage the cause of Christ, and that is the reason why. You know, black folks say, well, now this is not true. I'm vehemently opposed to abortion. In fact, I don't think any black folks in their right mind should be favoring abortion because that is one way of genocide and controlling us. You know, if anything, I mean, that is a reason for it. Well, one reason why black folks are not pro-abortion, or they're not. I think we tend to be a little bit more neutral. Is that okay? We say the reasoning is, well, you want to kill them. You're against killing them before they're here, but you're ready to kill them after they're here. What's the difference? You created the welfare state and the dependency. And so now, you know, my mother and father are on Social Security, and that's all they have. You're going to take it from them? I mean, that is the way that we think. And so because there is not that clear, comprehensive denunciation of sin across the board, that's what we see. And so they see the religious right as just being a scam to maintain racial dominance. I mean, that's the perception. And I know that the hearts of these guys are very sincere. Although I do have some theological problems. One magazine turned my latest article down before the election because of some of the very clear things I said. Along those lines, I do have some very basic biblical theological problems. However, yeah.
I was thinking during the Democratic election, they made all these promises of how we're going to bring a minority rainbow coalition,
Yeah.
and then they couldn't get unity at the end of the platform once they had their candidate. That was it.
Yeah. Well, let me say a word about that. I wish you'd turn that thing off. Let me say a word about that. As Christians, and let me just challenge all of us here, don't you let anybody make you monolithic. See, we are told that this is the Christian party or this is the Christian position. Well, the Democratic Party left me too. The Republican Party left me and the Democratic Party left me. I think there's sin messed up in all of them. And my big problem is that I get ticked off by you know, I better use the right term, the homosexuals and the lesbians and everybody else talking about their civil rights. And furthermore, some of our own black leaders courting that mess, and they know better. They know better. And so everybody's using us. And so, you know, you have the one-dimensional perspective on issues on this one side from the Republican Party. And then you've got this, everybody come on, we help you over here. And the whole platform is being crowded. So, you know, and I say as a Christian that this sits in judgment on the whole mess. And we've got to stop being lazy thinkers as Christians. Stop assuming because someone says he's born again and he knows Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior that he is necessarily biblically comprehensive. That is not an adequate assumption to come to. We need to challenge these guys. about not only what they're doing, but why they're doing it, and then understanding the nature. I wish some of the professors here at Trinity and all of the evangelical schools across the country, seminaries, would come up with a theology of a prophet. Say, okay, you want to be a prophet? Here's what the Bible teaches about a prophet. Now, don't call yourself that unless you're going to be the gadfly and a noisy nuisance of your society. And stop ignoring the active presence of sin in our heritage. So, I get frustrated. In fact, I was so into this last election. It's so upset my staff. I went out and I just gave a diatribe one morning in staff meeting, and my staff said, "Run, run, run!" I wish I could sometimes, however.
I think what you were talking about the mantle of the prophet, one thing that I guess kind of holds up that allegiance in the black community with a lot of the evangelical thrust, because especially like issues like a lot of black folks are against homosexuality. Matter of fact, I was talking to somebody the other day, one of the worst things you could ever do to a black person was call him a homosexual. You didn't call him that name.
Or the other term, yes.
The other term, right?
We are being recorded. Yes.
Yeah, okay. But I guess one thing that looks at, and a very real thing that the black community is looking for in the denunciation from the evangelical wing of Christianity is just a basic statement against apartheid. Because that's one of the things that always comes up, and it came up all during the election whenever I would hear black folk.
Yeah.
The main question they would ask when they hear Christians talking about sin was, what about apartheid?
Yeah. But see, you know, I've been there a couple times, brother, and I'm telling you, for the life of me, it is surely and purely incomprehensible. I told you who I voted for. Although I hope Mondale had a good analyst after that election. I'm doing psychoanalyst. One state. Oh. I mean, I'd have ended my political career too. Lord help him. I prayed for the man. I sure did. At any rate, enough about that. Who are we talking about? A. Philip Randolph. How did we get into that?
Voice of the masses.
Yeah. But really, if I think if there's one strong thing in me that just drives me nuts is the fact that everywhere I turn, even among our scholars, I just see too much lazy reactionary thinking. We react to everything without a reason for anything. You know, and we jump on bandwagons using terms like Christian activists and revolutionaries. Well, what is your rationale for revolution? That is my question. What is the rationale for revolution? We want to get down to how to without knowing why to. What are you trying to accomplish? What's going to be on the back end of this thing? What kind of legacy are we going to leave for succeeding generations? What implications does that have for Christ and his kingdom? Now, if I address this issue, what is it going to cost me? What does it mean? See, those are things that we need to wrestle with. And I'm not saying not to do it. I think many of us will be called to do those things. And God will lay his hand on us to do those things, and thank God for it. If I wasn't doing what I'm doing right now, I tell you, the next thing I'd be doing is be involved in politics or business, in that order. And I think it's great, but I think you've got to have a why for a living so you can stand anyhow. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you're going to screw up the legacy for the next generation. Okay, let's go on. The last voice, Jesse Louis Jackson.
You met Dr. King.
Yes, I think Dr. King as well. I did not put King's name in here primarily because of the philosophical input of A. Philip Randolph. King was a popular torchbearer of those principles. But I'm not minimizing King. Of course, King is incredibly important. But in terms of the one who came up with the concepts of mass mobilization and the original thinking, it was A. Philip Randolph. Jesse has given an interesting twist on all of this, though, whether one agrees or disagrees with where he's coming from. Jesse has represented the voice of political and economic parity. Jesse, for the first time nationally, has parlayed the black community into a position of political power to be reckoned with. To be reckoned with. And that's why conservative Republicans, for the first time, are beginning to really court strongly black folks. Because as you look at the population profiles of many of the southeastern states in different areas of the country and the pockets across the country, it is a political base that needs to be dealt with. And of course, Jesse has argued for years getting black folks on boards of directors of Fortune 500 corporations. And Jesse's public, his public posture and appearance in his last presidential election gave a lot of hope to young black folks, particularly those between the ages of 18 and 30. A lot of hope.
What is your response to Jesse and his alliance with Louis Farrakhan during the election?
I think if Jesse had it to do over again, he would. I think what happened was that. Now this is just you asked for my opinion. This is not based on any facts. I think what happened was, you're moving real fast, and I kind of felt sorry for Jesse. I don't know how anybody can make it without making a few big blunders like that. You're moving real quick. Things are happening so fast. Decisions, and the leeches come jumping on your bandwagon. I'm not saying Farrakhan was a leech, but people come jumping on your bandwagon. This one wants to help you do this. This one wants to help you do that. And this one's over here. And you're moving. You're making choices and decisions in between meetings and things like that. And things are just happening real quick. And I think what happened is that Farrakhan said, look, I want to beef up your security, because that's how the Legion first got started, if my understanding is correct. I want to beef up your security, and I'd like to give some of the brothers that helped. And I think just said, well, thank you, that's fine, whatever. And before you know it, Farrakhan started camping on the Rising Star, speaking out publicly, and Jesse was in a catch-22 situation. I mean, do you silence him? Is it advantageous? And then it goes a little bit too far, and then finally just said, look, I got to do something. So that's how I think that thing. I think it was more Farrakhan attaching himself to Jesse, to be honest, than Jesse attaching himself to Farrakhan. And then he don't want to upstage him. And Jesse loves his people so much that I don't think Jesse publicly wanted to upstage the guy. And then Farrakhan made these crazy. I think he should have gotten rid of Farrakhan a long time ago. When all this stuff started shaking down, he should have just sat down and said, look, man, I'd rather either keep your mouth shut and hang on, or maybe we just have to. But who's to say? I don't know what I would have done. More questions about this?
Was Jesse who you had in mind when you were talking about the problem of some black leaders going too far and courting the other minorities?
I think
Sexual
so.
minorities.
To be intellectually honest, I think so. There would be a time in which I would not speak harshly against any of our black leaders, but I think so. Mm-hmm.
Where would he be spiritually?
I don't know. I think Jesse's a believer. I'm almost certain he is. I think Jesse has.
He didn't really want to lay it on the line so as not to alienate people.
Right.
Is that probably.
Right. But you know, I want to speak in defense a little bit of what Reagan said in Jesse's position too. A little bit. Although I would have a hard time if somebody asked me outright,
Yeah.
was I born again Christian? I wouldn't say, well, I can go to church every once in a while. I mean, that's not, ain't too swift. I'd have to say, yes, I am. But I do think, and this is where the religious right would probably throw, athlete's foot shoes at me and stuff for saying this. But you do have to remember that we represent, or politicians represent, all the people. And that you must not use your Christianity as a leverage or a political device or manipulative tool. And I don't know what the balance is, but I agree with my young congressman friend Pat Swindle that says, no, I am not the Christian candidate. I'm a candidate who's a Christian, and I will represent all the people. And see, that's another illustration of one-dimensional thinking. We ain't thought that through yet. And so, because a guy doesn't come up and say he's a Christian and, and give the Christian perspective every time he lectures on something, well, I don't know if that's necessary. Does that sound heretical? I just think we need to be.
What do you think of perhaps a different attitude towards leadership, that be not of representing the people, but of leading the people?
Oh boy, that's a little, I think I'm out of my league on that one. I think, your question is a heavy one. What is the role of a politician? What is the role of an elected official? I would tend to say our role, now again, I feel like I'm a little out of my league on this because that is a heavy philosophical issue that a lot of politicians wrestle with. I would tend to say that your role as an elected official, now if you're appointed, it's a different deal, but as an elected official in a democracy, is to represent those who elected you, to represent them. And it's only at those points of compromise and contradiction where I must leave them and affirm what I believe is biblically right and true. Now that's the way I see our constitutional government and democracy working out. Now, if it's an appointed situation or whatever, still even that, I mean, I don't know. Does that make sense? That's where I would lean.
Since you mentioned Louis Farrakhan.
He mentioned Louis Farrakhan.
Since you mentioned Louis Farrakhan, what position, in my neighborhood, I grew up right around the corner from a Muslim temple.
Yeah, I wouldn't talk too much about him then if I grew up.
Okay. What in your travels, what influence do you see the Muslim movement having in the black community now?
Negligible. See what happened with, it's really not as big as it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
See, what has happened right now is that a lot of black folks are far more aware, and they can see right through the hypocrisy of what they believe doctrinally, biblically. I mean, not even if they're Bible-believing Christians. That it's a syncretism of Garveyism and Islam. And the Muslims in the Middle East don't want to have anything to do with the black Muslims, which is a fact, which is the reason why Malcolm got killed, because he started moving away from that and embracing and saying that hatred was wrong and black supremacy was equally as wrong, and we need to start reaching out, and it became too much of a threat. And so, they're having, and plus, with the split in the two groups, Elijah Muhammad's son, and then Wallace Muhammad, and then Farrakhan, both of them are trying to be more marketplace and palatable now. Okay, well, with them moving more toward compromise and embracing and moving away from the strong hate aspect of white folks and strong black supremacy, although it's still there, they have lost a bit of their punch in the process. So that, you know, it's amazing. They're not having, I know in Atlanta, I can speak for Atlanta, they're not having near the influence that they once had. Not near. And even in the prisons, there's a real revival going on right now. You know, Colson's ministry has been incredible among black inmates. There's a real movement of the Spirit of God. In many prisons, several years ago, the Christian population was much smaller and the Muslims just flourished in jail. Now it's swinging the other way. There's a real moving of God's Spirit. Many black prisoners, and the dominant thing there is Christianity. I heard one of the death row guys that was just executed, black fella, before they executed, said, "I just repent of what I did. I'm sorry. I've come to know Christ as my Savior, and I'm going to be with Him." And these kinds of things are taking place now. So I don't. Colson, I tell you, I have the utmost respect for that guy. Utmost respect for him. He's one of my favorite people. And he is really balanced. He's gotten a lot of blacks involved on his staff with his organizations. He's making an incredible impact. So.
Well, just one more question along the line of Colson. His fellow who got saved back with him was Eldridge Cleaver. Is he now just I heard he's going into Buddhism and some other things and just laying back?
I don't know what he's going into. You know, that's a classic case of evangelical marketing. Classic case. They you know, he got. I don't know if he had it. You don't know who Eldridge Cleaver is? I'm really getting dated here. Oh, how many don't know who Eldridge Cleaver is? Tisk. Thank you for your honesty. Eldridge Cleaver, you've heard of Black Panther Party? Eldridge Cleaver was one of the major forces involved with the Black Panther Party. And, you know, they killed a bunch of folks and burned houses and things like that back in the late 60s. And then he ran for his life and was in exile in Algiers. He became a Marxist. He traveled to Red China, to North Vietnam, to Russia, and the whole thing. He became a Marxist and really got fed up with it. He saw it for what it was, and he saw the oppression in Marxism was just as bad as the oppression in capitalism. Parentheses, let me tell you, I was on my way to Washington, D.C. a couple of months ago, sitting down next to this guy who is a consultant to the U.S. Senate in global marketing or something. He travels all over the world to find out how multinational corporations are doing in the economic climates for business, and reports back to some sitting subcommittee. So we're on a plane, and I was asking him, I said, you know, you're in and out of some Marxist countries and this kind of thing. What is the difference between Marxism and capitalism? And this guy had one of the most interesting and enticing descriptions I ever heard in my life. He said to me, and I thought it was going to be heavy. He looked, he said, "Crawford, Marxism is the exploitation of the masses by a few. Capitalism is the exploitation of the masses by a greater number." I said, "Oh yeah." That's it. He said, "But at least we get a chance to get in on the greed on our side." So that was "I Am a Capitalist." Tape is rolling. But back to Eldridge Cleaver. Eldridge Cleaver was in exile in Algiers, and he had an incredible conversion, something to do with the moon. I'm not kidding. Isn't that true, Raleigh? Something to do with the moon, and I never could figure that one out. But at any rate, he came back saying how he was born again or he'd been mooned or something. I don't know. But he came back saying how he was born again. That's fun. I shouldn't. It's getting late.
Now, he wrote a book.
Yes.
He changed from soul on ice to soul on fire. He had a religious experience.
Yes, okay. Joan, you're right.
Run it down.
And at any rate, he came back and then they just paraded him. Within months, he had his own evangelistic organization. They had him on TV, a real dog and pony show, you know, and the guy was getting burnt out. They had baptized him, and I won't tell you where they baptized him. But they baptized him, and I'll tell you after class. They baptized him, and just everything, right? Well, he may have had a sincere conversion. I don't know. But we used him up. He didn't get any chance to grow, which is one of the reasons why, I am so impressed with Colson. Do you know that he traveled? He traveled with top theologians who discipled him and taught him. And people steered him in that direction. And we need to never be afraid of Christian stars and never assume that they are where they're supposed to be. Somebody asked me, well, Crawford, what do you do? What do you speak on when you go to speak to the Falcons? I should be speaking on how to win. Well, when you go to speak to these guys, what do you speak on? I said, I give them the book, man. I don't assume nothing. I don't even jock talk. I'm not no athlete. I just give them the book because they need to hear it. I don't care anything about their name. They need to live the life. And that's what I'm not obnoxious. Some would say I am. But that's what happened to Eldridge Cleaver. And now he started making obscene jeans. Literally, that's true. He got into marketing jeans for men. I won't say any more. And then he got involved with some Moonies and some other people. Now he's running for political office on the ultra conservative ticket out in the Oakland area, and we need to pray for him.
But didn't he came back here also on the charge of rape, and with all this hoopla, he hasn't had to serve any time, right?
I don't think so. I've lost contact with him.
I
Yes.
was reading somewhere where he was trying to become a Mormon something. I don't know. This was
Well, you know his views on women. His views on
Yeah.
women are real bad.
Well, he got bad views, period, as far as I'm concerned. But we really need to pray for him. Really need to pray for him, and so.
What do you feel the role of, since we're talking about Cleveland, what did you think?
Since y'all asking about Cleveland, I'll ask you.
But what did you feel the role of the Panthers were as they relate to the role of King? And the reason I ask that is because I was like a junior in high school. I was working at this restaurant. This guy came in that was working with me. He was an older guy from Tennessee, and after we got to know each other a little bit, he came in one day and he says, "Herb, you know," he goes, I come from a background of rednecks." He said, anybody that wasn't white Anglo-Saxon Protestant wasn't anything, but he didn't say anything. But, he went on to say, he said, now, when I was growing up, he said, my dad always thought that King was a great guy. He says the reason my dad thought that's because my dad could sit on his porch in his rocking chair and watch King across the tracks and never had to worry about anything. He says, then the Panthers came in, and they came across the tracks and started burning my dad's house, and my dad had to stand up and listen. And he said, and his bottom line was, he had more respect for what the Panthers had done in the life of his family than he had for anything King had ever done.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering what you thought.
Well, let's extract, thinking of lazy thinking, we just talked about that. Let's extract some non-negotiables, okay? As Christians, our frame of reference, non-negotiable number one, we do not embrace violence. Okay, that is a bottom line non-negotiable. Non-negotiable number two is that love is to prevail in open relationships, okay? But non-negotiable number 3 is that God has historically used any means possible to judge people and to correct them. I mean, he used pagan nations to judge Israel and turn around and kick them for doing it. Okay, so those are 3 things. Having those 3 contextual things behind us, I believe it was unfortunate, and I'm sorry that it happened. I'm sorry that it happened. It was unfortunate. But God used, you hear me? Them houses burning down, folks running through the streets, turning over things and being whipped to change this country. I'll go so far as to go on record as saying that the laws probably would not have been on the books had it not been for that. By the way, I want you to go to the library. It's a secular book. Probably don't have it here. But the latest book on Kennedy, the Kennedy family, An American Saga, it's a new one. I just read that a couple of weeks ago. On this one point, to see what Kennedy went through. Kennedy only changed because of the pressure of society, convenience. And his brother Bobby was a lot more philosophically in tune to the movement and pushing John. But as Christians, it's a shame to say, it is a shame to say, Trinity Seminary, I don't know where Trinity is. I can't speak for Trinity, but I know the condition of a number of other predominantly white Christian organizations and schools would have never recruited us had it not been for the fact that the violence brought to the attention and the forefront the fact that black folks had to stop being treated as an appendage or a postscript to the Great Commission. Mission organizations would have never recruited us, and it took the 60s. Now again, I don't endorse it. I mean, it was wrong, period. Wrong, but God used it. And that's a shame, and I hope we learn something from that, by the way. Yeah.
Did I hear you say John was somewhat fresh into that?
Mm-hmm. He wouldn't have acted on the whole situation in Mississippi without, I mean, it was incredible pressure. The news media and everybody that's recording all this, he had to do something. But after he did that, now in all fairness, after he did move, philosophically he caught up with it. But it was just an era in our time when white domination was the thing, and you know it's just that's the way things were, and you just didn't change the way things were. Everybody was happy. Well, you know, those in power were happy, and why go about changing things? But we need to learn as Christians. Boy, we need to learn from that. I think what God has been doing to the church and allowing all this stuff to take place here in the Western world is that he's been giving us a message in the sky. Y'all love one another and be the ones who model acceptance in society. See, we in evangelical circles, we're still 15, 20 years behind. I am amazed. You know, most secular organizations and companies, if for no other reason but marketing and money, they have minorities in key positions of leadership. Did you know that? I don't know of any major Fortune 500 corporation, especially if it's a service or marketing type firm, that does not have some blacks or Hispanics in key positions of it. In fact, Zio, I forget how you pronounce his name, the CEO with Coca-Cola, he's Latino. The unbelieving world, I mean, to me, it's a shame. It's a terrible indictment on the body of Christ. Terrible. The unbelieving world has moved much further in racial reconciliation for the wrong motives, mind you, than we have. To me, that is a horrible indictment. I mean, it is a horrible one. And so I think God, if you ask me what God has allowed to happen, now I am not, I don't believe Israel and the church and all that stuff is the same, but I think the same thing that took place in the Old Testament with the nations judging Israel is what God has allowed to take place, not only in the 60s, but even today, the society judging the church. I think that's what's happening right now. Let me tell you a little bit of the game plan today. What we're going to do is that we're going to address accomplishing the task, some ideas and some concepts about strategy. It'll be sort of a little smorgasbordy here, but that's okay. And then we're going to, the last part of our time together is walk through a little bit of review, and I'll let you know what I'm expecting on exam tomorrow. And do you all have blue books here?
Blue books?
I mean, you know, little exam books.
Yeah,
they got
They got them? How much do they cost?
No, you should be able to get that free for the class. These classes.
All right, I'll check on that.
What?
We'll get a bunch of them. Okay. We're going to go through that, and then I want to say just deal with any questions you might have on the paper. We'll clean it up. I can't believe this week is going by so fast, isn't it? You're saying, yeah.
Where it goes real fast.
Do me a favor. 2 pages here. Kind of a, I say it's good. You know something? Yes. How great thou art. Oh my, yes. I'm so anxious to see my wife. I tell you, I love you all. When I get off on that plane Saturday. Oh man. And we're going to California next week. I'll be out there saying, Lord bless them up there in Trinity. Help them with the Trinity walk. Hey, I don't even feel guilty. No, I ain't gonna repent. I want to be carnal. Okay, now look, listen up. Now this is really important. This will help you with your papier, your paper. In fact, I've got a tape on this that goes through this. It's page 2, I think.
Where's page 1?
Who has page 1?
I have page 1.
Those two.
Now,
One that says Crawford on the
some of this stuff may not relate, but I think most of it will. Come on now, we got to hustle here. Let's get it together. Let's get it together here. I am a firm believer in strategy. Now I'll pass this out later on. Y'all might start looking at the pictures and say, ooh, wonderful. I'm a firm believer in strategy. I think the same Holy Spirit that can help us to relate to people on the spur of the moment can help us to plan in advance. And I really believe that one of the reasons why we're not being as effective as we can be in ministry in general, but often in cities, is that we don't have a plan. He who fails the plan is planning to fail. Or another cliche, he who shoots at nothing will hit it every time. We need to be on target. We need to think. Now, I don't mean that we're not flexible, but we need to have a plan. Now, let me just walk through some things with you. I want to talk about defining your life call. That is, determining your mission. I want to talk about planning. That is, implementing your mission. And then we're going to talk about scheduling, touch on that a little bit, which means to stay on target. And we'll deal with those things. Now, defining your life call, determining your mission. And I think this is a prerequisite before you get involved in almost anything. You got to know what you're about. Now, let me just qualify all of this by saying, God is not going to communicate the details of everything to any of us. You can just as soon bank on that. If he would, then there'd be no need for faith in the Christian life. God is not going to communicate the details of our life or his plan for us all at one time. I found for many of us it is a process. So, keep that in the back of your mind as we talk about this stuff. And the second thing I want to give credence to is that God has wired many of us differently. Some of us are more relational than others. Some of us are more task-oriented than others. Some of us are more goal-oriented than others. I happen to be a very goal-oriented person. I enjoy, this is crazy, but I enjoy, everything is a game to me. When I drive in the car for long distance, if it takes us if it's 500 miles, I'll say, let's see. That means I'll figure out how much time I can go, and with the first 50 miles, I'll quote 5 verses, every 45 minutes. I just play games with myself like that. I always do that. It's all goals, and it's fun to me. I mean, I really, really enjoy that. And my wife is going, oh, you're crazy. I mean, she enjoys the process, the people and being around them. Well, let's just go over. I said, well, for what? What are we going to accomplish? I don't know. We're just going to have fun. And we're all white, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, in ministry, if you're going to accomplish anything, you do need to have some type of objective. And I have found, too, I've been involved in ministry now long enough to realize that a lot of people give up and quit the ministry not because of the problems associated with it, but they've lost purpose. They just wake up one morning and say, what am I really all about? What am I doing? Why am I involved with this, Pressure to get married. Don't you have a baby yet? What are you doing with your life? And all this stuff, And I hear it all the time. And a lot of it is because we don't know what we're all about. Now, let me just give you a little exercise that I've gone through. And again, I'm almost embarrassed to even touch on this right now because it's taken me a long time to process this. I'd like to challenge each one of you to take one day a month, just one day a month, as a personal prayer day and planning day. And I don't mean planning for your courses or nothing like that, but for you, for your life. And sit down and write down, what are the needs that I'm deeply burdened by? I mean, what really makes me pound the table and weep? That's how we got our whole ministry stuff going. I was praying and stuff, and I felt the Lord moving on my heart, and yet I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I spent some time with a marvelous Christian consultant from Southern California that really helped me along these lines. And he said, well, Crawford, what really makes you pound the table and weep? Why don't you just write it down? And it was amazing how all this stuff was in my head, and I didn't know it was there. And I just start writing. And I find for me, writing is therapeutic. I hate it, but it's therapeutic. And I began to write down. I'm tired of the black church being looked at as an appendage to the Great Commission, the need for development of strong black role models, to have a legacy mentality for generations to come. And all these things began to flow. And they came on paper. And you'd be surprised what's in you. it's going to surprise you. But take some time when you can strip all the pressures away from you, go away someplace, be by yourself where nobody knows where you are except for maybe a close friend, and say to yourself, what makes me pound the table and weep? What are the needs that I'm deeply burdened by? And then extract from that, now write it in pencil, by the way. Write it in pencil. Then extract from that a purpose statement, which is one simple statement, a clear statement of your mission. Now this sounds easy, and it is, but it's revolutionary. I would gladly give a life savings for this, but I ain't got nothing in my life savings, however. Purpose statement, only thing you do is that you wrestle with one crisp, general statement that includes those needs that you're deeply burdened by. This may take a little time. It's easier said than done, but for example, after writing down all those needs that I'm deeply burdened by, the purpose statement came out like this. Here's Life Black America exists to serve as a catalyst to contribute to a harvest of souls, spiritual awakening, and laborers to go from Black America to the world. Now it incorporates all those various needs that I listed. It's blue sky, but that's okay because the next thing tells us our objectives are the continuous activity which moves us toward our purpose, which addresses our needs. You then write down 6, maybe 7, but no more than 7. No more than 7. Continuous activities which moves you toward your purpose. Now, let me distinguish between objective and goals. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Some people say that goals are the ultimate, are the continuing activities that you're doing. And objectives are the steps to reach your goal. Then other people flip-flop and say objectives are the big continuous activity and the goals are the steps. Now I happen to use it that way. It doesn't make any difference. Objectives are the continuous activity which moves you toward your purpose. And put this expression next to your objectives. By continuing to, then you state it. These are the things that you always have to do in order to reach accomplish your purpose, which addresses the needs you're deeply burdened by. Let me give you an illustration. Let's see. One of our objectives is, how am I going to accomplish this purpose of serving as a catalyst to the existing black church and seeing a harvest of whatever? One of the things that I want to do is by continuing to provide a ministry of training, AI, in evangelism and discipleship to black pastors. 2, by continuing to develop culturally relevant resources in evangelism and discipleship. You know, those things, just put by continuing to, by continuing to, by continuing to. By continuing to, I just lapsed. But those are the continuous activities that you have to do. Now you get more specific as things go on, but I would challenge each one of us as we think of our life to begin thinking this way. Planning maybe one Saturday a month where you do it and make that a habit. I think it's one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me. In fact, I have planned a whole year in advance that I call it a day with the Lord. And there's a little place that I go to. It's a monastery. It's about 20 miles or so from Atlanta, 2,000 acres. And they give you a room, 3 meals, and you leave whatever you can afford to give them. And you walk around and pray and think. And I find personally, I need that. I need that perspective time where you get out of the jungle of activity and pressures, and you see your life in its proper perspective. And I just spend time praising the Lord on my knees in the Word. I'm usually, the only thing I take with me is my yellow pad and my Bible and a pen. And just think and write and evaluate. Okay? All right. Now, planning, implementing your mission. Now, I want you to take this and use this approach for your paper, by the way. Planning has to do with what do I need to do to accomplish my mission in life. Hey, thanks. What do I need to do to accomplish my mission in life? This is the NOPE approach to planning. By the way, this is something that you can use to approach anything. When we, Campus Crusade for Christ, held KC83, where they're expecting over 20,000 people there, they used the NOPE approach to planning that event. When we're planning a smaller outreach on the campus, we use the NOPE approach to planning that event. When they planned Here's Life America, where literally tens of millions of people were exposed to a mass media campaign, they used the NOPE approach to planning. You can use it for anything. This is a standard procedure that you use. First, determine the needs. What are the needs? And as you write your paper, by the way, the first thing I want to know is, what are the needs? And by the way, most of us are answering questions ain't nobody asking no more. You know what I mean? Evangelical church, sometimes we're responding to issues that the society is not asking or raising anymore. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I'm just saying that before we sell people a program, we got to make sure we give them the respect of finding out what the needs are. Determining the needs. What are the needs? And by the way, if you're writing your paper and say you want to do something, or I don't know, several of you said, is it all right for me to do something with American Indians or a pregnancy center or whatever? Tremendous. The only thing I want to see, I don't want no snow jobs. You know, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I sure can tell usually when somebody's giving me a load, you know what I mean? And, you know, he started doing these flowing, sweeping generalities. But what I want to see on the paper is some thinking as to how are you going to go about determining what those needs are. What are the needs? What are the needs? Before we started our pastors' conferences, like I said, we held small listening conferences across the country to find out what the needs are. We evaluate everything we do to find out what the needs are. Because we want to be sure that we're scratching people where they itch and making an impact. Okay, so you determine the needs. And by the way, I'd like to see that documented too. Some kind of documentation, whether you've interviewed people, or, you know, a lot of stuff that you're doing is original and may come from your own experience, okay, but some type of documentation, some articles, if there's nothing been written in a book form on it, give me some articles or something. Determining the needs. Okay, now that you've determined the needs always tell you what your objectives are going to be. I mean, it'd be stupid for us to the guys tell us, well, the 5 things that the pastors needs that keep coming up are family, evangelism, expository preaching, discipleship, and church organization. I say, fine, we're going to have conferences that will speak to the Sunday school. I mean, that's El Kabong. You know, we design what we're going to do based upon what those needs are. And, thank you. Based upon what those needs are. So your objectives come out of the needs. Your objectives come out of the needs. Karen and I in our home, you know, I travel a great deal, and I have to constantly talk about it. You know, I'm not going to be super spiritual with you and say that my wife's never lonely. You know, no, I'm lonely too sometimes. And, you know, we have to constantly talk things through. And it's not cut and dry. Some years I'm free to travel more than other years are, just depending on what the needs are. You know, she may be going through a rough time and need me to be around more. My kids, now I'm beginning to schedule myself around events. They're getting older, and my son wants me to see him play his little basketball games, and my daughter's into things now. And so I don't take some things, you know. The needs determine what my objectives are, what I want to do. And so, you know, be sensitive to need. Just because you're sensitive to need don't mean that you don't do anything. Don't mean that you don't. Doesn't mean that you don't. It means that you do something. That's right. Double negative. However, you determine what the objectives are based upon what those needs are. I can't wring that further. There has to be cohesion. Yes.
What do you do when you're in a situation where you find yourself in situations where you're talking about the pastor's conference, and they state 5 things they need, and
Mm-hmm.
you make the response that I'll do a Sunday school lesson. Okay? But if you're in a situation where you see a need, okay, but well, let me put it, there's a need stated, okay, and maybe from a viewpoint,
Mhm.
this may sound like your viewpoint is too high. You see there's a need that's needed to undergird this, but that's not being mentioned. Okay? In essence, I guess, without sounding egotistical, you define a need that really is needed, although that's not what the people you're asking, even the group you're dealing with, is telling you what the need is. Okay? How do you approach that?
Well, yeah, often, in other words, what you're saying, often people will not tell you what their real needs are.
Or they don't even know that that's what they need.
And they don't
That's
know
why
what
I
it
say that
is.
sounds kind of,
Well, you address it.
judgmental.
You address it. If you perceive that to be a real need, you need to confirm that. What we do is, I might say, in our planning committee meeting, after we evaluate the conferences, I might say, you know, Pastor so-and-so told me this, but I don't know about that. I think I also saw this. How do you guys feel about this? You know, and they say, well, I think you're right, Crawford. So, but what I'm saying is, be sensitive to stated and non-stated needs. You might perceive that to be, but don't be arrogant, though. Don't be presumptuous. You know. Yeah.
I have a question, talking about these needs now. Has there ever been a time with you, because I was looking at this, and you may see a need, or a need may be stated. Is there ever a time where you just can't
That's
deal
right.
with that need?
That's right.
That you just don't have the means or whatever?
That's right. That's right. And that's right. God didn't call us to meet all the needs. I mean, I tell pastors this, not only pastors, but other groups that we have. They say, well, Crawford, if they say to me, Crawford, one of our greatest needs that we have is to develop a Christian day school, let's say. How do we do that? I'll say, brother, that is a great need, but God has called us to do this, evangelism and discipleship. Now, it has to do with evangelism and discipleship. We might consider that. You got to know, it's a tender balance, but you got to know what you're all about, and that you just can't meet all the needs. You don't have all the gifts. You know, and you wake up, let me warn you about something. This is the importance of planning. It is good to have a broad base of exposure and experience to a lot of things. But unless you nail down pretty soon the basic direction in which God is leading you, This is what this midlife crisis business is all about. So listen to me. This is what this midlife crisis business is all about, to a large degree. It's people who have really never defined their purpose in life, or they have, but they spent most of their lives chasing rabbits and not pursuing their purpose. And they wake up one morning with a lot of regrets, realizing that they're so far away from being and doing what they were supposed to do. I have learned the last 3-4 years of my life, it's hard, but I've learned to say no to some things. It's been hard, but I tell you what, I want to live. I want to live, Doc. And I ain't no martyr. And I don't want y'all visiting me in no insane asylum. Be hitting my head on the wall like Murdoch and acting like a dog or something. You know.
So, do you ever, okay, when you go to these conferences then, do you ever have pastors that come up to you and say, listen, this is the need that's been expressed to me by members of my congregation. I can't meet that need. And do these pastors ever think, well, it's time for me to get out of the pastor because I can't meet the needs of my flock? Or would you suggest to them then, well, brother, if you can't meet that need, maybe you ought to go out and find a contractor or somebody, whatever. How do you deal with that?
Tell them to pray. I don't minimize prayer. I don't minimize prayer. Seek God's face. What is God saying to you in this situation? See, that's why we write our plans in pencil, and even these things. Let me just move on. I'm afraid that we're going to run out of time, and I want to answer these questions, but I want to. You understand about the objectives flowing from that? Okay. Now write your objective, your continuing activities down on in your paper. You know, and I'd say for the paper, identify a minimum of 4 objectives. Identify a minimum of 4 objectives. Now don't go over 6 or 7. No, don't go over 6. Because you want to make it realistic. The third thing is the plan. The plan has to do with what are you going to do to accomplish those objectives? What are your activities? What things are you going to do in sequential order or sometimes concurrently to accomplish those objectives? Keep in mind the principles of a movement, mind you. Okay? And keep in mind Matthew 28, discipleship. In fact, you know, let me just say, 2 of your objectives ought to be, I'll just give you these 2. You give me 2 to 3 more as a result of that, but 2 of your objectives ought to be the fulfillment of the great. In fact, let's just say this. Why don't you make a purpose statement? Your purpose statement, I can tell you right now, ought to be to fulfill the Great Commission through whatever your strategy is, a group of people that you're targeting. Okay, does that make sense? Let's just say that that'll be the purpose statement, and then out of that your objectives for whatever based upon those needs. Okay, the planned activities. Make sure that your plan and your activities reflect your objectives. I can look at a man's calendar and his schedule, and I can sit down and do this with my staff now. I can do it myself, which is really hurts. I can look at what I plan to do for a month. Usually the first of each month I have a large day timer book. The first of each month I list down the major things that need to be done and delegate as to who needs to do what and this kind of thing. And I can look at my calendar a year or 2 years ago, just at my list of things to do and what I actually did in my schedule, and tell you without even thinking whether or not I accomplished the right things. And that's the importance of planning. Plan your activities so that they reflect your objectives. Ask yourself this question now, and this is true about life. How is what I'm about to do going to move me toward the accomplishment of my objectives? You find yourself not getting involved in a whole lot of stuff when you ask that question.
Could you answer one more time?
How is what I'm about to do going to move me toward my objectives? Or, what is the best way to accomplish my objectives? Now, evaluation is something that takes place all the time. It's a part of planning, actually. I guess I should say planning and evaluation, because you're always asking yourself the question. You're always asking yourself the question, are these activities and are these objectives really meeting the needs? Okay? And when you write your paper, I want you to put in there some type of system of evaluation. Whether you say, hint, hint, hint here, that once a month I will evaluate what I'm doing, and this is how I will go about it. Let me just throw a few questions out, standard evaluation questions. What did I intend to do? What did I actually do? And why did I do it or did not do it? Sometimes it's not wrong. Sometimes you may have purposely not done something that you put in your plan to do because you had to make a mid-course correction. You saw something else that you were blinded by or whatever. That's okay. But those are some stock.
What was that last one?
And why didn't I do it? Or why did I do it, depending on what, Yes,
Now,
sir.
If in our paper or in what our ultimate goal is for our life, you may have covered this, I just missed it, but it seems to me you kind of break it down to these 4 things personally, and
Mhm.
these 4 things directed towards your
Yeah.
mission. And so if you know that that certain things have to be accomplished in you before you can ever start,
Yeah.
or so you can continue to do a good
Yeah.
job.
Sarah, let me just say this. Take don't make the first one related to the second one for the purposes of the paper. Just the note for the paper for what you're going to do. Now, what you're planning to do may not have anything to do with you personally, what your long-range things are. This may just be a part of the process. It might be just a program or something that you want to be involved in, or it could even be a hypothetical situation for some of us.
Just mainly to learn how to use these
Right,
skills.
right. But I would like for all of us to apply it to our lives, because I've just found the personal joy of going through this. Okay? And all of the above needs to be in writing, by the way. In fact, as you outline your paper, I started to require that you turn in an outline of your paper and then this, but that's a little bit much. But you should work from the outline of this. Would help you a great deal before you put it together in final written form. Now, this page 2 is unrelated to the project in some respects, although page 2 will tell you how to plan a little bit. The scheduling side, you might want to use some of this, but I do want to walk down through some of this. Scheduling. This is probably the most important. Scheduling helps you to stay on target. Critical question in scheduling is implementation. Now, you can be great with plans. Writing up a plan in a 72-degree climate control office is wonderful. I mean, we got plans all over the place. But that don't change the world. That's the problem with much of Christianity now. We got a lot of great ideas, but scheduling translates vision to reality. It's doing it. How am I going to do it? There are 3 essentials to scheduling. A good calendar. Now, I don't know about you. I have tried all kinds of calendars. I mean, the ones you put in the pocket and the fancy kind of stuff and all of these other things. And I've tried. I would have spent more money on gadgets than my son would call me, my little 3-year-old would call me Mr. Gadget. But I've spent a lot of money on things, and I've come to the conclusion that the best one for me is a large day timer. I don't carry a calendar with me, and I tell you why I don't. I don't carry a calendar with me because sometimes my heart gets in the way of reality. And somebody will ask me to do something, and I'll be a little soft touch, and I'll write it down. But this way, I have to tell them, well, let me go check with my calendar. It gives me time to pray, time to process and think about other responsibilities. Now, that's for me. Some people have the discipline to be able to carry the calendar and still say no. Me, I'm sometimes a little soft touch in some things.
That's like calming the office.
That's right. That's right. And so a good calendar, I use a day timer system. I use a large calendar where I can file those things back. And I like the day timer system because on the month flaps, on the desk size day timer, I don't like, well, never mind. You can put your list of things to do for the month. And I usually take my list of things to do for the month. And I periodically, when I do that, often I'll take out my ministry plan just to look at those activities and make sure that, I'm not chasing rabbits here. And I religiously, the first of every month, just before the first, I write down those things there. Then once a week, Sunday night, at home, downstairs, while I'm watching TV or doing something, I write my list of things to do for the week. Usually extracted off of that master list and anything else that may have come up that I need to handle. But a good calendar is very, very, very important. Secondly, accountability. If you know that you've got a weakness in planning and a weakness in following through, get another person or a group or a good friend to help you to do what you say you're supposed to do. Accountability.
In this area, would you advise married people to be accountable to their wives?
Yeah. Well, usually, not unless both of y'all have a little problem with in bad shape. Yeah, good friend. My wife is an excellent administrator. Incredible. And she's really good for me in this area. I am not by nature an administrator. I'm a very strong visionary type leader, and I enjoy 3-ring circuits and doing a lot of stuff at one time. But my wife is really good for me. She, she'll say to me, "Well, honey, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? What's supposed to be?" She always reminds, especially with the house. I conveniently forget some things. And the third thing is discipline. Ain't no such thing as shortcut to implementation. It ain't gonna ever feel good. You're never gonna feel comfortable about doing it. Just downright discipline. You gotta do it. Non-negotiables about a schedule. I write these things down. I say that there are 6 non-negotiables. Number 1, time with the Lord. Both daily and that day with the Lord. I write that down, schedule it, and nothing should interfere with that. Write it down. Sometimes we have a hard time with our time with the Lord because we don't schedule it. Pray on the fly. Devotions on the go. A verse a day to keep the devil away. All that good stuff. And then for those of us who are married, time with your wife. And may I just say, gentlemen, we gotta love these ladies. And don't use the fact that you're so cotton-picking busy in seminary and what have you as an excuse for not spending that quality time with her. Now, you may not have no bucks to take out for a meal or that kind of thing, but take her, walk around the mall, schedule some time with her. My wife and I have lunch together once a week, and about 2-3 times a year, we go away on a planning weekend together, where we just stay in a hotel someplace, have fun. Sometimes you can't afford to do that. You just go somewhere and just be with her and listen to her. We need to cultivate that because it ain't going to get any freer. I'm probably, now you're not going to believe this, but I probably have much more demands on me than you do right now in school. It never gets easy. It just don't get, and if you don't cultivate, I hope I'm not sounding paternalistic here, but if you don't cultivate these habits now, it ain't going to jump out of the closet and jump on you later on. I mean, that's for sure. Time with your wife, time with your family, your kids. You know, I take my daughter on dates with me, 7 years old, and try to spend time with them at home. When I'm home, between the hours of 6 and 8:30, I don't answer the telephone. It sounds terrible, doesn't it? But I don't. I don't even talk on the phone. For one thing, I spend about half my day on the phone. And for another, you know, I'm gone so much that I want them to know that I'm available. I wrestle with my kids. I help them with their homework. Go out in the yard and play a little football with my boy or something like that. But they need to know that they are special and that your whole life is not ministry. That church and those people are going to be there in the morning. And, you know, Jesus is the Savior of the world, not you. Not me either. I mean, we get this little God complex that it ain't going to go on unless I'm there. I mean, it's the truth of the matter. It's more ego than calling. So, I mean, I'm just being honest. That's probably true. And then you need to schedule in time for rest and recreation. Rest and recreation. Scheduling time for personal development. What are we doing to just help ourselves? Just for ourselves. I started playing golf. I just wanted to play it. I had the opportunity of leading my son's soccer coach to the Lord a couple of years ago. I'd taken it in college. And the only reason why I took it in college was that I didn't want to play. I didn't want to take bowling or something else. You know, there was a little, my choices were kind of narrow. So I took golf.
Yeah, you're a professional now. You got to play golf.
Huh? No, brother. I go to College Park Golf Course, $2.50 for 9 holes.
I play for free on the base.
Is that right?
Yeah.
All right, that's cool. Got me some starter clubs. Well, I found that I need personal development. I'm taking some speed reading courses and scheduling time to just do something for you. That ain't unspiritual. And then, of course, the other non-negotiable standard appointments and meetings. Standard appointments and meetings. By the way, if you take some time for yourself, you find that you're a lot more crisp and fresh. That you can deal with a lot more pressure more easily. You see things in its right perspective, and you're sleeping all right. And some of us, we say how people are unspiritual and carnal. Sometimes they're not unspiritual, they're just tired. And they're frazzled. And, you know, they're just worn out. They need to go rest, go watch a ball game, or go to a movie. Don't go to movies here. All right.
Pinocchio.
Yes, Walt Disney.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
You know, when I was working, I was really under a lot of pressure, and in a different way than this. What I would do is I would have 150 kids a day.
Oh,
That's
gee.
enough for anybody. That's too many. And so I would come home, and I would take 15 minutes or half an hour every day to do something I wanted to do. It wasn't required, it wasn't demanded, but just something that was a diversion from whatever. It was to go in the shopping mall, whatever. And I found that really was kind of like taking a mini vacation.
Yeah.
It was real healthy.
Yeah. Here's a book, Tim Hansel's a friend of mine wrote it. You already read that book? When I relax, I feel guilty. When I read that book, I felt convicted. But it's really true. But balance is so important. Balance is so important. I have to be careful. I have a bent for it. I don't know. They call it workaholism. I enjoy working. I don't want to read it. I want to be carnal. This is my ministry here. Can I preach? Can I preach? That's where you Trinity students are gonna be. I'll tell you. Still on the way, still away, no day, no see. I know. Okay, review your plan regularly. Ain't no use in writing a plan if you don't review it. You know, review your plan regularly. Allow the Lord to edit your priorities. Remember, we are not indispensable. When a man of God dies, nothing of God dies. You know, one of the most powerful passages in the Bible and most convicting is Joshua. Moses, the great lawgiver, led him out of Egypt, revered, powerful. It begins by saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. A friend of mine said, Crawford, your suits will look just as nice on somebody else. I said, that's crude. It's true, though. That's terrible. I made my wife promise she wouldn't get remarried for 20 years after I'm gone. Sucker wearing my shirts and clothes. Okay. The last thing is write a list of things to do for the month. Edit, add, or delete from weekly. And here's a little tip that I picked up from Steve Douglas, who's Executive Vice President of Campus Crusade for Christ. He's a whiz kid, graduated from MIT, probably in the top, I think it was top 2%, 3% of his class, undergraduate, graduated from Harvard, MBA in the top 3 or 4% of his class. Brilliant but humble guy. Little technique. When you write your list of things to do down, just brainstorm, write down everything you have to do, and put this out in the margin, whether you use a little yellow tab or whatever. Put down TP, which is top priority, HP, high priority, MP, middle priority, LP, low priority. Top priority things are things that you have to do. Ain't no getting around it. You done procrastinated too long. It got to get done. HP are high priority things, were things that you really should do. Have to and should do. Middle priority are things that would be desirable to do. And low priority are things that it'd be fun to do, but it's not really urgent to do them. Secret. I used to feel guilty if I didn't check off everything on my list. But you know what? I found that if you just concentrate on the top priority and the high priority things, you stay on target. You are going in strategic direction. And you just carry over. The middle priority will become either high priority or top priority the next week. But it's a matter of staying on target. Okay? You say, well, what does this have to do with evangelism, cross-culturally? Well, I guess maybe specifically all of this stuff doesn't have too much to do with it, but in generally it has a lot to do with it. So I think we need to be organized personally. And a lot of our frustration, I don't know about you, but a lot of my personal frustration, it ain't spiritual. It is a fact that I've lost sight of my purpose. I'm trying to do too much, or I'm just running out of time, and I feel rotten about it. I feel guilty about it. And so, as we are involved in relating and ministering to people, no, we don't want to use organization and our time and goal setting to be manipulative, but we want it to be a servant to accomplishing what God's called us to be about.
I was at Van 84, and Gordon McDonald was speaking. He finished and asked for some questions. And somebody asked him, what do you find is the biggest problem with pastors, full-time Christian ministers? And he said inward disorganization.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And he recommended Steve Douglas' book on managing yourself.
Yeah.
And the book that he's written on ordering your inner life.
Yeah. It's really true. I think the disciplined life is a happy life, which doesn't mean that you don't give time for other people and interruptions. But I really believe that, we need to discipline ourselves. And we can get a lot more done. I find, and maybe it's not so with you, I find that when I feel overwhelmed, that's the time for me to sit down and write things down. And when I write things down and prioritize them, 90% of the time, it ain't as bad as I thought. It's really not as bad as I thought. Like this week, to be honest with you, this was the worst week in some respects for me to be here at Trinity. We have a major fundraising campaign that we just did. I've got some major engagements coming up. We're having a large leadership conference next month, February 7th through 9th in Philadelphia. We have back-to-back 4 pastors' conferences coming up. I'm doing 4 marriage conferences, and I've got some board meetings coming up that I need to be prepared for that. And my plate was just spilling over, and unbelievable the amount of things I had to do. And I was feeling a little bit frustrated on Saturday, to be honest with you. I got off the plane. I said, man, I'm going to get all this stuff. Then they had insult to injury. The boy breaks his arm. My wife is sick and all this. So the other day, Monday, to be honest, I was walking to the breakfast, and I was just frustrated.
You had one of those Trinity walks.
Yeah, I sure did. I had Trinity and His Life Black America walk too sometimes. I walk like that myself sometimes. Come in the office, okay. Yeah, I mean, it ain't all my platform look, But I came back and I sat down and I wrote on a yellow pad, what's frustrating Crawford? And I wrote down those things that are frustrating me. And I listed those things down, and I said, okay, what does God have to say about these things? And I went to the Word. Remember that the ministry is not yours. Okay. And went to my pressure passage, Psalm 55. Got on my knees and confessed my sin for worry. And I got up and I started writing down things I needed to do, prioritize those things. And I said, this ain't that bad. I made some phone calls, took some things off my plate and put on my staff's plate and let them worry. No, not really. No, well, yeah, a little bit. And, and so things are fine now. May not have a ministry, but I feel great. Yes, what the heck? Who cares? We work too hard anyway. That's all. Has this been helpful, or has this been an exercise in futility?
Oh, helpful.
All right. Yes. You get a second sheet?
Here's second.
Hey, you guys, man, can't you do a job? I asked you guys to pass the thing out, man. You make paper airplanes and stuff.
Well, see, Pastor, it was the mayor wasn't in his seat.
Okay, this turned into a blank class now. This is the way we really act.
You people, huh? Don't call me brother. You don't act like one of us. I think is a hallmark question if you're going to relate cross-culturally in the city, and that is the key to motivation. Would y'all read that later on?
Okay.
Appreciate it. We know that motivation can be one or two things, or both. Extrinsic, obviously, and intrinsic. Extrinsic motivation has to do with forced behavior. And that force may be a little bit too strong, but, you know, it's like my kids. My son, I didn't clean up his room, and I've tried to encourage him lovingly and intrinsically motivate him. I said, "Now, son, intrinsic ain't working with you, Doc. I got some extrinsic. If you don't clean that room up, you're going to be fired up, Doc." So he cleans it up. But anyway, that's extrinsic, a little bit of a silly illustration. Intrinsic motivation has to do with self-esteem. They're inseparably linked. They are inseparably linked. Usually, a lot of us, see how do I put this, I'm having a hard time transitioning. Some people, I'm no psychologist, but I've done a little reading in this area. Usually people who lack a good, solid self-image, self-esteem, will respond to a task in one of two ways. Either one, they'll become extremely performance-oriented. They don't feel good about themselves, but their need to be liked and accepted is so deep that they'll perform. But that's dangerous. Oh, that's dangerous. Because you wake up one morning being used, feeling used, and you don't know how to get out of that trap. So it's performance-oriented. And a lot of workaholics have terrible self-esteem. A lot of guys who really excel in the leadership position are not always the most secure people in the world. A lot of Christian stars, once you get close to them, you see that, boy, there really are some basic self-esteem problems. And so that's one extreme. And they respond, and their motivation, their internal motivation really is to be liked and accepted. So they perform. The other extreme is that they feel so worthless that they're handcuffed and they don't do anything. They never promise, they shy away from responsibility. They really don't feel good about themselves. And a lot of minorities are like that. And we mistake them for being lazy. It's not the fear of failure, it's a fear of success. Often. We've never been there before. We don't know that, and it's unfamiliar. And I'm not sure myself. I don't want anybody looking at me. And so I think the key to intrinsic positive motivation is self-esteem. See, if you know who you are, you can sacrifice and give. Classic passage, Philippians 2. Humility is realizing that you have a position of strength and knowing who you are. Jesus didn't count it robbery or a thing to be grasped to be equal with God. He knew who he was. He accepted that. So he said, I know who I am, so I can give it up. You don't have to stroke me. I mean, you don't have to give me a platform. You don't have to, I'll do the deed. Intrinsic motivation. And that's a principle. That's a true principle. So I think in order for, and this might be pop psychology or whatever, but I think not. I think in order for people to really be free in Christ, they have to know that they are loved, that they have been created in the image of God, they have gifts, and abilities, and God can use them. And He will use them, and He wants to use them. And you have to keep playing that song. And then I think another thing is that you got to model it before them. And really help them. It's not unlike your children. I mean, this isn't just a purely ghetto problem. Let's face it. I mean, it's in many of our families. Some of us have been told we ain't worth a quarter. Some of us have been told you'll never make nothing out of your life. And we've shied away from positions of leadership and responsibility because, you know, we just don't feel good about ourselves. But you have to, you know, a few positive things. Never criticize a person's person. Never criticize a person's person. He can't do anything about who he is, and that's unfair. That's below the belt. We've tried to remember that with our children. Sometimes it's hard, you know, you get ticked off. I mean, I am a Christian, but every once in a while I do get mad. And, but you always, when you say something to them, make sure you let them know it's what they did, not who they are. You don't say, you stupid jerk. Kid grows up thinking he's stupid. Or you can say, now look, I know that you know better than that. What you did was dumb. That's a different thing. What he did was dumb. He's not dumb. So, you know, but I think we really need to, I'm not just trying to be cute here, but we really need to make sure that as we relate to people, we honor their image factor, the fact that they've been made in the image of God. We honor that, and we make them feel important. You know, not in a silly way, but really to honor them. Some positive things when you're working with kids, always try to reward them, and even older people. Think of legitimate ways to reward them. They ain't stupid. Don't be dishonest or manipulative, you know, faking it. Think of ways to reward them and to honor them and to push them further than yourself. Legacy. And so you know, that's just my comment on that. Any other questions about that? Yeah.
I always feel like I'm asking these off questions, but when you're talking about modeling this before, my wife said she was listening to Colson. Colson was talking about whenever he goes into the prison, he goes in with a tie and a suit, okay, as a model to the fellas in there of what can await them once they get out, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, do we maybe do a disservice by trying to contain everything, I'm trying to get this out right, contain everything in the black community or in a underprivileged situation with the intent that the way to handle it is to remain? Can that work against and take the motivation of coming out? Okay.
I'm not so sure I follow.
Okay.
Let me just feed back to you so I can see if I'm tracking with you. Are you saying that we ought to model to them in such a way that they can do better and come out? Or is your point of attention that we ought to model with them just the character qualities no matter whether they stay in or go out?
Well, maybe give the option of both, okay?
Yeah.
And especially when we're talking about esteem, okay? Because when we're talking about using discipling, you want to create leadership, which means it has to be traits that you give out to the individual or that you're trying to develop in them, goals to accomplish and so forth. And do we always do that in our urban ministries, okay?
Yeah.
Is it more of a, let me show you how to be comfortable where you are, okay? Rather than really giving them that motivation to excel out.
Yeah, well, here, what we're trying to model is not lifestyle.
Okay.
We're not trying to model lifestyle, but truth and character.
Right.
And I think that's where it lies. That's what I'm talking about. we're not trying to model lifestyle, but truth and character. Now, inevitably, none of us, you can't strip any of that from us. And leadership has nothing to do with them being out of their economic situation. Again, you see, that's that vertical thinking about leadership. It's a cultural, economic thinking. There are leaders across the board. Leadership has nothing to do necessarily, although unfortunately it does, practically speaking, in our materialistic society, but leadership has nothing to do with one's lifestyle, but one's ability to influence others. So what we're trying to model, what I mean by modeling, I mean modeling character qualities and truth, rather than the way you do something or the way I dress. Or I think Colson may have a point too. I don't go to the other extreme. It's balance, you know. I mean, if a kid really wants something better from his life, he's sharp and has a good mind, and he doesn't want to be in that neighborhood. He doesn't want to grow up to be a pimp, or he doesn't want to grow up to hustle people or to just. Nothing's wrong with being a garbage man. I mean, it's an honest profession, but he doesn't want to grow up to be that. Certainly we can help him with that, but our priority is to model truth and character, because that's the touchstone and cornerstone of discipleship. Does that make sense? Yes, Terry.
Just along those lines, you want to model Christ-like characteristics,
Right.
not culture.
Right, exactly.
Which is often hard to do. And I think where I remember failing when we were working with Native people is that you try to disciple, skipping over the aspect of we are worthy before Christ, we're all important, we're made in His image. In most discipleship plan programs and booklets, that's something that comes later on, if at all, or something you add in casually. And so they're not even motivated to keep going in it because it's an intellectual exercise.
And that ought to be on the front side of things, modeled. Yeah, that's true.
I'm starting to be more aware.
That's true. That's true. And I really love my family and my kids, and one of the things I try to do with each one of them each night is just tell them how precious they are in the sight of God. And our oldest son does exceptionally well in school, and he gets all A's. He's been getting all A's ever since he was, a little guy. And I read his report card and I joke with him, "Oh, so boring here, nothing exciting." But I'm sure to tell him, because that's not all good sometimes. The performance side of things. He's a hard driver, and he has his little faults too. And I tell him each time, I say, "Brian, I am so proud of you that you did that. But I want you to know that if you got all F's, I'd spank you, but I still would love you just the same. That your performance has nothing to do with how much I accept you." But we need to. People forget that, though. We need to play that over and over and over again. That we accept people not because they do what we want them to do, but just because of who they are. Now look, let me just go over the exam. Some things I want you to look at as you study. I want you to thoroughly know the biblical basis of evangelism. Okay? And I want you to know the 6 stages of the history and development of the black church. You don't have to know much of the filler, but at least be able to list those.
With dates.
With dates, yes. Are there 5 or 6? I forget. There's 6, aren't they? I want you to know the growth and development of a movement. Don't worry about the other stuff. Concentrate on primarily the the qualities of a movement. You know, most of the other stuff that I gave you was really sort of an extrapolation on those other things. And now, I want you to note, too, the definitions of racism, the two, economic and social. You don't have to give them word for word, but I want you to be able to distinguish between the two. And I gave 6 cautions for our involvement in a cross-cultural urban setting. Do you all have that down?
White items of idol.
Yes.
What was it again? I'm sorry.
6 cautions. Somebody want to read those off, just in case? Y'all have that?
The presence of white idolization.
Right.
Don't do your ministry as a platform for your own purpose.
Right.
Not a vehicle for your success.
Right.
You have to come with a servant spirit.
Right.
Don't abort your spiritual authority.
Right.
And be adaptable.
Right. Good. Now, on the bridge of communication, just know, you don't have to know the details of it, but just know the points on the bridge. That might insult you all intellectually, I realize, but I would like for you all to be able to give that.
Which one, I'm sorry?
Huh?
What did you just say?
Just the points, just the major categories, not the filler, but just the major categories. Now, I gave you one key irrevocable principle yesterday in cross-cultural evangelism. I'd like for you to be able to regurgitate that with the 3 reasons for it. And just give me the philosophical, be familiar with the philosophical history of Black America, the 5 people that I mentioned today. Okay? And I want to ask you about the planning stuff tomorrow. I want to see that on your paper. So that won't be on exam. Mind you, you all have the option to whatever you want, whichever grade you want to count. And this exam tomorrow is not so much for a grade. Like I said, I sincerely wish there could be a pass-fail thing, but it's for my communication. I want to know how well I've communicated. Have I been understood? And not only that, I think the principles that I've shared with you is worth studying and internalizing. And I want to thank you all so very much. This has been it's been fun for me. I really have enjoyed this time.
Why don't you stay?
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like his poetic person on practical theology staff.
Yeah.
We have a month or so.
Well, when you all find one, I'll pray.
Okay, you stay.
Okay, but really, study hard. Not hard, but have fun studying. I think if you just reviewed your notes a couple of times, you should have it.
How long is the exam?
Well, it depends on you, how long you write. I mean, it's going to be all essay, and I estimate that you should be through in an hour, hour and a half, maybe. Not that long outside. But, okay. Yes.
Just have one question about when you go back and you go through that once a month, do you go back and start all over again?
No.
Round the table and stuff?
No.
Where do you go when you go back to it?
I just refine it, you know. I've got a little bit of extrinsic motivation too, the guys that I report to, you know. So it's not purely self-initiated. I usually just go back and look at it and see if I'm on target. I erase some things that I didn't bring that with me, but ours is a little bit more sophisticated. It's on a large piece of paper, and there's milestones that are there, and there's a vision column that I keep writing in new ideas on. Then I take, see, it's a 0 to 2 years, 2 to 5 years, and then 5 to 20, short range, mid range, and long range column. And so I just prioritize the dreams that I have there. That's what I usually do in that once a month thing. is go back and check off what we've accomplished or what we need a little more time on. Sometimes some things are unrealistic. I need to put them over in the big ring. But I don't have time to do the whole thing. Anybody else? Questions?
Can you take me through just a little bit about the structure of these conferences? I know they all have different meanings and headings and so forth, but just a general overview of how you.
All the conferences are the same.
Yeah, how do you structure them? You know, I mean, what?
I'll tell you after class. I'll let these folks go. Thank you. See you tomorrow.